Okay. We're going to get a topic tonight that we're not going to go very far with. Anyway, that's the general topic of sensitivity, and something that we'll come back to again later on. And something like this should be taken first. In fact, what's going to come at the very last, about 3 years from now, is the part that should come before everything else. Because in the modern mysteries, it's not a matter of authority. It's not a matter of getting second-hand information. All of what we've been talking about with spiritual worlds is something that has to be experienced directly or first-hand or thought. That's why the major emphasis in the talks has been how we experience them in our daily lives. How we experience thought, how we experience drink, etc. Now I want to talk about extensions of our awareness and feeling and various spiritual worlds. And doing that, we have to do something that none of us, not I, and not really clairvoyant, would say difficult matter to talk about. So we have to talk very carefully with experience and with reason and intuition. Now, there are a lot of different ways that one can look at the subject, hallucinations, visions, voices, things like that. And it's hard because the phenomenon is so large. Start having experiences, very complicated experiences. It's, how there's really not big differences between us. Our lives are really quite similar to each other. We have a lot of similarity. Light has a good deal of light in the same range. And between all human beings, no matter how greatly different they are, it seems like there is much more similarity than difference. But when the character is intensified and the attributes of the character are magnified, to the point where a person starts reaching out to the worlds, because we use it part of the character that is coming out, the experience seems very, very much different for each person. One doesn't have to have it literature, one doesn't have to read a lot of literature at all to find out that there are a lot of different outlooks involved in what seeing is, or what experiencing in the world is. We're going to look at it primarily through the gateway of sensitivity. We're going to look at perception, inner perception, outer perception, spiritual perception, material perception as sensitivity. And we talked about the spiritual world. Said that we have something of us that related to the world before we can experience it. And in some regard, in the spiritual worlds, our experience is very similar to the experience of a phenomena in the physical world. Because an amoeba is in the physical world, is aware of the physical world, and can propel itself through the physical world, and even has a sensitivity. So it has, it's aware of what is out there. But it's not developed in such a way that it has specific organs of sensitivity. So like first we have a general organism of experience. perceive it more keenly, we develop in special places. Eyes, ears, some of them are generalized, the sense of touch and the sense of heat are generalized in the entire body. Taste and smell are extremely experiences in the physical world. So what we're saying is that between the macrocosm, which is the divine, the overall, the great world, the microcosm, which is our own little world, in the process of developing our own isolated little world, our own, all our own, we have set ourselves apart. Almost like a master that will set up a nucleus somewhere and then expand the world. We can sort of set ourselves apart. So when we're talking about sensitivity, there are several things that are implied. One, it implies that there is someone who is sensitive. Two, something to be sensitive of. Sensitivity itself, which could be called perception. I'm not going to really try to touch this subject philosophically. It's a very interesting subject. It's the Buddha dealt with what is called the Siddhanta Sutra, which deals with the relationship of seer, seen, and seeing. And what we're going to then do is look at the whole process of seeing, or sensitivity. So there is, what we're trying to say is that our experience is such, it's not as the material world looks at it, that there is a subject and an object. We're saying that there is a bridge, subject and object, that we participate in all, subject and object. This becomes to have one of these chains a little bit. So this is a very, very big, study. And let's talk about something. Let's talk about types of sensitivity. We're going to look at just two types of sensitivity. Involutionary and evolutionary. Sensitivity depends on the quality of the vehicle that you have to be sensitive with, for one. If you have a hard course constitution, you haven't worked up, not in order to produce a body that can experience the external world, you have an insensitive vehicle. Then it depends also on the degree of adjustment. How you are adjusted to your physical body, or to your desired body, to your spirit body. So part of the sensitivity is what kind of relationship is there between the intelligence that is sensitive to things and the instruments that it has to use. Okay, we could go a little further with that, but I think go on. I'm just going to be very short about an hour. Yeah, he says, yeah, I believe you. Okay, so sensitivity then is a verifiable experience of something outside of our personal being. That is awareness, knowing that something is there and being able to verify it's in there, do something about it, and how it extends beyond yourself. Now, let's talk about different degrees of sensitivity. First, the sensitivity. But I don't want to say something. I'm going to say something now that you make statements that could sound rude, could sound offensive, but I don't think in that way. Insensitivity means that being is awake and aware in the physical body, self-conscious, at the lowest possible, and that all of the attention is focused in the physical, in the material, but not very deep. That is to say, you can always recognize somebody like that. Somebody like that would probably be on dead in a talk like this. The reason why is that it is utterly foolish. One of the first observations, one of the first tests of sensitivity and of a growing sensitivity is tuning in on the relative worth or the relative need of things. The person who is at the lowest degree of sensitivity is someone who is almost never ill. Someone who is very comfortable in the physical world, and that is sufficient. That's all that they need for their happiness. They're tuned into the world, not really highlighted. And by that I mean to say that I don't mean to say that they are incapable of perception. But perception can carry very far. It's sort of like that there is a phlegmatism to it. And in this phlegmatism, the individual is content as they are. The body has status quo. There's one place, there's one state. There's the psychology that goes with that. The physical body has the psychology that's all its own. So such a person of nature, and they may find the experience of the forest, they might find that pleasant, but it wouldn't make it a reverie, for example. It wouldn't be a joyous type of experience, because that one wouldn't go any further than that. See, what I'm trying to say is that corresponding with the sensitivity to the world goes to the state of consciousness. When a person's in an insensitive state, they have a kind of consciousness that they won't need more. And if a person begins to sense that their needs are inadequate, that just that kind of a food is not enough, that's an indication of something more sensitive. One of the surest tests of a person who is sensitive is whether you talk to them about spiritual things. And if you can talk to them about spiritual things in such a way that they're aware of their inner being, and that they're aware that that inner being is so vast that our mind is not experiencing the same way every time. So, like some people would listen to this and say this is all crazy talk. They would have no sense something more. That would be a healthy physical individual. That would be somebody who's at the stage where, like this is where the earth is right now, and they're right along with the earth, and as the earth changes, they'll change. They're healthy, they're perfectly adapted to conditions as they are right now. But some people will say, no, I like what this says, because this just says a little something more to me. Or if you take the subject of religion versus spirituality, some people are highly religious. They would cling to the Bible. But if you ask them if they get a different experience, if they read the Bible over again and again, they say, no, it's one truth. That's it. If you look at an individual who is more sensitive than just someone who is physically adjusted, such a person will say, yes, I read it one time, it means one thing to another, and then if I read it a half a year later, it says something more to me, or it says something other to me. So the first degree of sensitivity is insensitivity. Now there is nothing wrong with being sensitive, provided one doesn't become too phlegmatic or one doesn't become too inertial that they just want to stay that way forever. Okay, we're going to move on to theory of sensitivity. Now, the whole claim is that the difference between someone who is a sensitive and someone who is not is, some people say, like, it's a gift from God. It's really not. Not any more than this physical body is a gift from God. If you look at it, everything that is given to us is a gift from God. And some people feel that just having sensitivity to other worlds makes someone much better. It's someone at an advantage over everything else. From a spiritual point of view, the possibility of having an advantage is there with sensitivity. It isn't necessarily going to be the case. From a spiritual point of view, the difference between someone who is sensitive and someone who is not is a matter of catching the physical world. That is, if someone is suspended loosely in their physical body and not strongly attached to it and through the physical world, that person is sensitive. Because the focus of their attention is not exclusively on material things, but the focus of attention is capable of looking at other kinds of existence, other things that we experience. That's the primary difference between sensitive and insensitive, is the degree of attachment to the physical plane. Now, that in itself may not necessarily be a virtue. Let's start looking at evolutionary versus evolutionary sensitivity. There is such a thing as an evolutionary inverted sensitive versus an evolutionary very sensitive. There are two ways you can be loosely connected to your body. If you're in it, you're in it. And if you're not fully in it, it's a matter of either you haven't come in yet, or you've come in and you're on your way out, so to speak. If you haven't fully come into your body yet, That's called evolutionary sensitivity. If everything that you can learn at this point with just the physical senses and the reason, and it's not enough for you, and you're fulfilling your duty in the physical world, but are looking for something more, and are extending your perceptions beyond just the sense organs as sense organs, that is evolutionary sensitive. Somebody who is graduating, who's trying to get much more of the physical than just the physical itself. In terms of involutionary sensitivity, almost all of the animals and certainly all of the plants are sensitives. They're not even in a full awakening of consciousness in the physical. Animals, for example, there's a close correlation between some of the attributes of the ethers and the way ultraviolet is spoken of by science. Like etheric vision and etheric flows cannot penetrate glass organization. Only penetrate through crystalline organization, such as ionic solutions, ionic solutions, something like that. And the fact that most birds and insects are said to operate totally on etheric vision is demonstrated on physics point of view that those same birds and insects function in the ultraviolet spectrum. There's an overlap there. What is said about etheric vision, etheric sensitivity by etheric seers, people like that, is much more extensive than what physical science says about the ultraviolet. Most of the very weak tools to work with just machines as outside rather than using the body itself. So, with this kind of sensitivity, one is aware of what passes through the light energy, through the vitality. For example, this is the way I'm absolutely positive when we look at it again and again and again. I've never seen anything. We have all of these things that we study about in our eyes, for example, that can explain how people in hundreds of feet up see a fish that is several inches beneath the surface of the water. Especially when there is sun glaring on the water and there are waves rippling, there is not an eyesight that in the physical sense is that keen. But if you have an interpenetrability, a light sense, such that you can see the vitality and you can see through, so you're seeing the world where there is no such thing as reflection, that's an example of the illusion of light. In fact, most of the etheric vision is not associated with eyes and animals. Most of it is associated with smell. In fact, even evolutionary, involuntary, negative etheric vision in humans can be associated with smell also. Yeah, I don't know if you ever saw that movie. It was very pretty movie. In it, just a little too pretty for the countryside. Old Butch Cassidy as a kid. He was popular in the late 60s and early 70s. All the very movies. And they kept going off all of these jobs and getting away with it. Finally, they got an expert tracker the bomb. It was a Native American. And the tracker did not look for any signs in the brush or marks on the stone or anything like that. The tracker did it completely by smell. By smelling, like everywhere you go. I had an experience about 8 days ago. Someone came to visit me in a chair that an old person that ever sits in. And they sat in my chair, and we had a visit, and they left, and I sat in my spot, not intentionally trying to eavesdrop or anything like that, but suddenly I found myself having all kinds of thoughts that are not common to me. And it dawned on me that where you go, you leave through the effluvia behind you. And this is what the tracker was doing. He was smelling, he was picking up what people were leaving behind. And so with the theory of clairvoyance, with smell, using the smell, you might say, you have something like an animal sense that picks up the third qualities that you leave off, which are not bounded by things like air or things like that. These are very much interpenetrable types of things in your impressions. I had a friend that had that kind of good vision, and he got on all these mailing lists for spiritual organizations of one kind or another, and promotions of one kind or another. He had big stacks of mail, and he didn't have time to look it all through. So what he would do is he'd sit there with the stack of mail, he'd hold the letter up to his nose and smell it, and if he got a good inward impression, he could not go to the next class. He would even look at what it said. He would do it all by smell. So an involutionary clairvoyance or involutionary sensitivity is because there is not a complete indwellingness of the etheric body in the physical, and when that is the case, then there is as much ability to place attention in the etheric world as it is in the physical world. And this happens quite a bit. Animals will go where they have they find they're overwhelmed because they find something, an etheric pathway that they follow their own visions. They go to where they're secure, they go to where their own vibrations are. The Native Americans have this kind of etheric sensitivity. They not only have that, but they have the ability to draw off energy off objects. And when they knew they were going to die and they wanted to draw off into the world, they have their favorite objects buried with them because they can draw the energy off and sustain a little bit of energy below around the outside of the body by sort of vampirizing their possessions. All right, this is involutionary theory of sensitivity. An evolutionary theory of sensitivity, we've talked a little bit about it, it's called theory of clairvoyance. You see it by seeing the energy that comes into whatever lives, or that radiates out of whatever lives. And this is done, positive etheric sensitivity is usually associated with the senses at a distance, that is with eyesight or with hearing. And even among those two, it's much more associated with eyesight and with hearing. And a positive, controlled evolutionary sensitivity for a person who has a robust etheric nature such that they're not just dragging and falling apart and not being able to keep up with things, but they have an excess of energy, especially an excess of energy that is focused in the light ether that we talked about, and they have the ability to use that as a neural fluid and associate with the neural fluid and shoot it out through the optic nerve. Instead of using the optic nerve only as a transmission line for things that are picked up, neural impulses that are picked up by touches off the retina, the energy is put right out of the eye itself. In fact, if you're mildly clairvoyant yourself, you can see little daggers of light that come out not more than quarters of an inch out of a pupil. The person is exceptionally loving, or the person is exceptionally angry, or something like that, and you're mildly clairvoyant, you could see little blades of light out of the eyes. And the experience of clear vision is very amusing. We talked about, for example, being in the corner of a room like this, looking out into space, following all three dimensions of infinity, and that puts you into a throughness type of dimension. When you do that, very often what you see is the strands and filaments of light energy and energy that are in the cosmos just sort of woven together. It's like seeing a gigantic, intricate spider web that has all sorts of spectra all through it. You see rainbows, like the whole world is full of rainbows. And there are showers of energy through objects that exist, beings and things that are in the third realm. Another experience of it is you have heightened attention, and you're very energetic, and you're giving yourself to something wholeheartedly. Not only does everything become lighter and brighter, but you begin to see out of the corner of your eye flashes of light. You see them as flashes of color. Very often, sometimes something simple, it's like little Tinkerbell lights or something like that that look on and off, which are usually gold and blue. Some seasons I don't know more. There's all of that stuff. But when you see things out of the side of your eye, the reason you see them out of the side of your eye is because you haven't learned yet how to focus on the blind spot. There are things that you can do to dot on a piece of paper. We do physics labs all the time, that in the same way that if a car is in a certain place behind you, you look at your rearview mirror, you can't see it because there is a blind spot. There is a normal field of vision. There is a blind spot also. And you can learn where that is, and by learning to focus into the blind spot and direct energy into it, and then to focus the blind spot on what you wish to do is the way of vision. Some of it is very objective. Some of it is actually like, if you look very, very intensely, surrounding the field of vision, you can actually see surrounding people. You can see lights. Or if you look away, you can carry the whole vision of your body with you as an active image. Not just the retinal but a regular active image. And those are examples of vision. Probably the best way, the most obvious way to see a vision is the way that scientists saw in flowers. If you look at flowers, you can see that all of their color is not come from the color of the ground. That their color actually comes from the light itself. And they're using interaction between the pigments and between the light. And if you look at flowers that are in the time of bloom, they have more color than the color of both. And by being able to focus on that excess of color that goes beyond the petal of the flower, is sort of like a gateway to the realms. The etheric realms then are, we see the matrices, the forces that hold together all the forms of this world, plus all of the energies that bring about changes in this and the etheric world. So to have etheric vision, especially if you can focus the reflecting ether, is to know what is going to happen when it happens. If you can focus, and it's very much like what is theorized by physics. The kind of get away, you get away far enough, you can see the Earth as it fast. If you get away far enough, fast enough, you can see the Earth as it was 1,000 years ago, because the light only travels at a certain speed. And if you go faster than the speed of light, you can jump ahead. You can see the light that was being emitted from the solar system 1,000 years ago. You can see exactly the way it was. Well, what spiritual science, wisdom claims, is that if you have a sensitivity in yourself to a higher octave of consciousness, this has the effect of what scientists call going past the speed of light, and you can see things that are coming into being as well as things that have been in the past. Now, in the evolutionary sense of belief, there are words that I don't like to use. It's positive, negative. Probably the best word here is control. So, if you're in control of your eyes, you can look at what you want to look at. Close your eyes and not look if you don't want to look. The part of matter is ears. You can desensitize yourself to what you don't hear as well. But if you are an involutionary, uncontrolled sensitive, you are an individual who has no instinctual control and no personal self-control of your faculty. And it's sort of like the equivalent of a car or a camera like this running free on its own. Just whatever it sees. Wherever the car leads, or it bounces off it next determines where it's going to be going afterwards. There's no control. See, with involutionary, since all of the plants and animals are involving, it's pretty clear that they all have an involutionary clairvoyance, which is all right for them. But there are some human beings that have chosen not to involve themselves in the physical world because they feel the physical world is illusion. They don't want to waste all of their time on illusion. They don't want to waste anything what they think is not worthwhile. What they want is enlightenment. And they want to go back to the golden age of previous times. And involutionary human sensitive is one who has not got into the physical yet. And for such people, it's more to their advantage because the day of the physical world is shortening. The amount of time that we have to gain objectivity here, the understanding of finality and fitness that we gain in the physical world, that day is shortening. And in this window of time, if we don't gain that kind of objectivity, all of our future evolution will be harmed. We'll have an impression of what something means, but we won't have the ability to objectively examine it and look at the different attributes and characteristics of it as though they were things in themselves. So it's very much to the betterment of all human beings that they develop material world objectivity and develop it as smoothly as possible. And so for a lot of people that still have an evolutionary clairvoyance, even if it's instinctively controlled, it would be to their advantage to focus more on the physical world. And for this reason, various different hierarchies of instituted practices that help close off the evolutionary sensitivity to a lot of people so that they are forced into material work. They're forced into material work to think that this is all here there is, this is all you've got, you work much harder to make it more positive. If you still have a realization in the inner worlds, and you sort of look in that innocent garden of Eden, there's not much incentive to come into the physical world. So like the use of alcohol is something that for an evolutionary sensitive throws us off that brings a consciousness in the physical world. The use of animal food, eating animal flesh, produces an ambition in the material world, in the outer physical world, and it throws us off a sensitivity in the inner worlds. This is why, for example, many Native Americans still have a evolutionary sensitivity, and for them it was associated with very innocent being part of nature. And this is why alcohol is so devastating to them. Knowledge. He could not control himself. When he did alcohol, he just had to have it. It was once the experience of it. And this, it makes for a miserable life or two. I'm not by any means giving cheers for alcoholism or anything like that. The use of alcohol over several lifetimes is closing off this evolutionary sensitivity so that people who become insensitive and relatively quickly pass from one kind of sensitivity to the other kind of sensitivity. This happens very frequently. The spiritual organization I study with has lots of members in Africa. People are still coming from the tribal kind of consciousness and have a very simple, beautiful see have a free vision. The various types of spirits that sit along trees and the sacrifice of the tree and cut it down. There is a big communication with the tree that they're laying down. Or if they slaughter an animal, their deals, they break up because they realize that there is an inner life to it. But a large number of these folks, at least in the society that I belong to, write in letters how they make the transition from an involutionary sensitivity to an evolutionary sensitivity, because they have in effect something like no flaw, because they lost the etheric vision, and they're getting intimations of the physical world because the times are going faster. They can pass through the physical existence much more quickly and then get back to the spiritual worlds with little loss. I thought this was going to be for everyone. I've been working with very terrible books tonight, and I'm trying to upgrade this notes, but people So a controlled positivity means just that. You're in control of yourself. Uncontrolled is like you're ill. It's like if your body runs away, your heart runs away, and you can't control your heart rate. Your heart rate is supposed to go up according to your activity or go down according to your inactivity. But if you're in a state of ill health, you lose control. An uncontrolled evolutionary sensitivity is a negative kind of sensitivity. I'm going to look at what is the notes here and see what I want to cover something. I'm going to talk about involuntary sensitivity right away because it's going to apply to all of the other classes we're speaking of. Involuntary sensitivity. There are lots of people that claim to see. And there are lots of people that are psychics. Now the question is, either evolutionary or evolutionary, either controlled or uncontrolled. There's even not controlled and uncontrolled for evolutionary sensitivity. I'll try to give examples. We've had plenty of examples of just pure evolutionary sensitivity. That's sort of like an animal instinct. But in uncontrolled in humans, there are several things we look for. Number one, there is a basic non-pluralistic orientation. That is, people who are negatively part of life. That is, having uncontrolled evolutionary consciousness. Usually talk about the phenomena and not about the meaning. They talk about, oh, this and this, and they base the whole experience on phenomena and not on meaning. A second characteristic of that is that there is a great fear somewhere. Either it's a fear of the Russians, or fear of AIDS, or a fear that has no rational basis, because the interning that is uncontrolled, it responds exactly to the psychology of the person. And we are placed in a matter of survival. Like this man that spent 29 years after the war was over in the jungles of the Philippine Islands. And he got such that they did tests on him. He came back in 1974. And at just a click of like the snapping of a twig, he could wake out of a deep sleep, totally alert, without thinking a move. And when there is fear, there's protection, there's a tremendous drive in towards self. It's associated like with if you're afraid, all the blood runs to the center of your body, and the ends of your hands and feet turn cold. It's just the opposite of if you're in a rage, all the energy goes out and such like that. So the second characteristic then is a negativity, and the third characteristic is a psychological syndrome of some type or another. This is why, if you read psychologists' examinations of psychics, psychologists have come to the conclusion that anybody who sees things which they call hallucinations is psychologically unhealthy. Because all of the psychics that they have dealt with are involuntary psychics. And all of them are not only involuntary, are out negative and have some psychological ill health. And because that constitutes the majority of psychic people. And so they just come to, if you mention that there is such a thing as a positive psychicness or controlled sensitivity or clairvoyance, to be able to reach out and perceive things, they don't think that's possible because it's so very rare, and most people who have the ability just keep their mouth shut in the first place and don't say anything. And so those are characteristics. If a person is describing a lot of phenomena with no meanings, if a person is slanted, like a good example is if you look at psychic predictions. I look at the National Enquirer. I'm very glad that Isthmus now looks at it too. I've been keeping record of the New Year's predictions by psychics, and for several years running now, they're very low, something like 2 or 3%, with their New Year's predictions for what they're going to be. But they have articles in those tabloids like that about psychics who do pick up things. And if you note, the things that the psychics pick up are almost always disasters. Again, because they're tuned in to a negative thing. It's very rare that you find an involuntary or a negative clairvoyant who predicts something happy or positive because they're just so much tuned into fear of darkness and preservation and things like that. It just isn't what they do very often. Now, it is possible, and this I've seen many cases of, it is possible that people who are beginning to have evolutionary clairvoyance can also have an uncontrolled positive clairvoyance. That is to say, they are trying to see, and they're developing their ability to see, they're becoming more soulful, and they're intentionally culturing sensitivity in themselves. But it's such a, I don't know about you folks in your meditations, but I find in my meditations that unless you're very, very peaceful and very, very much in control of yourself, the least little deflection puts you way off course from what you're picking up or what you're meditating. And in the early stages of evolutionary clairvoyance, sometimes the ability seems to turn on by itself just by a person getting excited. Or when a person is starting to reach out and see things, if they get excited at that time, they don't know where they're pointing or what they're picking up or anything like that. And that's sort of uncontrolled evolutionary or uncontrolled voluntary clairvoyance. And this is what you find among people that you see are striving very hard, who have a positive outlook toward life, but their faith isn't strong yet, their self-control isn't strong yet. This is something that one grows each on. So that it's not really fair to say that there are a lot of negative clairvoyants running around, that they're all negative psychics. But what they're trying to do with their life and with their sensitivity is the matter that counts. Now we've introduced most of the concepts. Most of the rest should come fairly easy. So with etheric vision, then, you see things, you can see anything from fairies to, like for example, when people sweat, they throw off things that the body no longer needs. And those things have chemical structures. And for example, people have seen people sweating, and they see all these geometric figures coming out from under their armpit. And what those are the, those rings and things like that they draw in organic chemistry that describe the way different bodies take place. That's what a person is seeing with etheric vision if they're seeing somebody throw off the physical stuff from their body. Or if a person is thinking and bringing their thinking all the way through to the brain, that produces forms, not necessarily forms that are graphically seeable. They're not. It doesn't produce a flower that has all the little dots of color and all the little hairs on the petals or whatever like that. But sometimes somebody may think a very positive thought and will have a flower-like shape. And things like that are what are seen. Like you can see angels and fairies, or you can see, actually you can read with the inner ear, you could read other people's thoughts. All you have to do is focus on their aura and listen, and edge of the aura, and you'll pick it up. That's your thoughts. Okay, that's what etheric vision is like. At a deeper level of sensitivity, there is emotional sensitivity, which makes one aware of the desirable. And in the same way that the etheric energy is seen as life, as vitality, nothing in the etheric realm is ever seen in a stock objects in the physical world are completely stopped. If you're looking at the etheric world, things are always moving, things are always changing, nothing ever stands still. When one looks at the desire world, it is, as we said earlier, all feeling, all emotion, all desire, all passion appears as colors. The most common forms of clairvoyance, talking about sensitivity that has been raised to the level of actually seeing things, it is clairvoyance. The most common kinds of clairvoyance among human beings in our times are emotional clairvoyance. The reason for this is because it's the least controlled part of our body, of our series of bodies, and it's the most intense parts of our bodies. The physical and the etheric are pretty dense and pretty muted, and it takes a special character. Usually people working with the arts. I find more people that have etheric clairvoyance that have developed it through the arts, through the visual arts, through the auditory arts, than coming from the scientific realm or coming from something like study of politics or philosophy or something like that. It's people who actually use their senses, extend their senses by giving themselves to what they're perceiving and uphold the etheric vision. But more people have type of vision that comes from the desire world. And as we said, in the desire world, we're something like an amoeba. We're shaped like that also, so like a big glob. And in the amoeba there are little organelles, which aren't really quite organs. And we have little organelles in our desire body, which are vortices, which are whirlpools. If someone is involutionary, the trails, let's say this human being is facing us. Let's say it's a tall human being. If this is the right side of the body, if on the human being the tails of the vortices seem like they come up the right, down the left, that is somebody who is evolutionary. If it is somebody who is evolutionary, who is approaching seership, usually it's mystics, people with very, very strong, unctuous kinds of desires, of intense feeling, then you will see the spirals coming the other way. They come, it seems like the tails come up the left and right. Up the left is positive, up the right is negative. The way you can tell is if you're fearful, even if you're anxious, you will have the arms moving up the right. There's a kind of a fluttery type of quality that goes with it. If you're used to being in control and used to being awake. If you're having extreme feelings and if you're in control, like if you're very deep in prayer, you can actually see it. It forms like a set of pinwheels right in your forehead. And in the intensity of your feeling, a very strong light begins to come. It can get as large as a spot like that on the center of the forehead. And you see the arms of it wisping around at very high speed. And if your etheric and physical body are accommodating themselves to a desire world vision, a voluntary evolutionary desire world vision, there will actually be flutters of energy that you can feel. And if a person just gets nearby, it feels like a wind blowing on them. The physical is then adapting to the rapidly rotating vortex in the center of the forehead. It becomes a very strong phenomenon. There was a time that in myself I used to be extremely innocently pure in my desires. I hadn't written up all of my negative desires yet, and I had been very conservative of creative energy, and I was extremely intense in my feelings. And then after a while, I wasn't so conservative of the energy, and I've actually had a few embarrassing moments being personally very close with people and have their eyes come popping open and say, "What is that?" Feeling the vibrations off of the center of the forehead. So, all right, what happens then is when your desires are focused and they're controlled focus of your desires, the highest of them being love, you produce like a diamond-like brilliance light at various of different centers in the desire body. And they then become the organs of perception for clairvoyance of desires. Now, the intensity of desire is a part of it, but it's not enough alone. It requires a waking up the desires. Like people who, like take Wagner, for example, had a desire world clairvoyance. He had a very clairvoyance as well. But people who have a whole spectrum of feelings, and they cultivate a large number of feelings and become poetically sensitive to all kinds of emotional qualities. That's the kind of person that you expect to become an evolutionary control clairvoyant. And they can bring themselves to a level of love of a given nature, and then they can literally see in that world of consciousness, that level of consciousness, because what they're doing is attuning their desire, their feeling, to that region of feeling, and then they can see. This is alluded to in the Bible as a command, because a lot of people would like to have clairvoyance, or so it seems, first. They would like to have clairvoyance because they could see other people's secrets and all such like that. I think it would really be wonderful. But after they've had it for a while, if you know what other people think ill of you, or you know that other people are plotting and scheming against each other with jealousy or anger or things like that, and you see how much sorrow there is in the world, and you see how gross the desires people are, very often it's so much of a weight that a lot of people don't even want to open up their clairvoyance. There have been a number of people that visit the mystery schools have opened up the clairvoyance and were beginning to attune it and decided that no, they didn't want this clairvoyance and took steps to close it off. One clairvoyant for me that was quite famous did that Carol here. He was Annie Besant. She was one of the Esophageal Society seers at one time, and she just turned it off. It was just too much for her. And this is why it says in the Bible, freely have ye received, now freely give. Let your light so shine that people will see your good works and praise your Father which is in heaven. And that is to say that people are commanded, because every act of clairvoyance, if it's a voluntary act of clairvoyance in the desire world, is an act of love. See, I'll come on to it in a little bit. But you have to give something of your desires. If you take, that leads again to an involutionary, very selfish kind of desire nature. People who have a lot of hate, and people who have a lot of destructiveness and have intense feelings and know how to channel and focus them, can open up a negative clairvoyance that they can see in the desire world, and they can see all of the negative feelings and desires. They can't see positive because they're looking only with the quality of repulsion. They're not looking at the quality of attraction at all. They can only, sort of like two dogs sizing each other up, because obviously animals still have desirable clairvoyance. And in fact, most disputes in the animal kingdom are determined on the basis of emotional clairvoyance than on actual physical strength. I'm sure you've seen it happen many times that a little tiny dog will chase off a huge big dog. It's because that little dog can see the aura of the other dog, and it knows it knows that it's stronger. It has more of that courage to it, and it'll just take it, it'll just drive it right off. Quite often things like this happen. Animals would have a desirable clairvoyance, and they can tell the nature of somebody, whether they like them or don't like them. I had a friend who had a cat that she could tell who were going to be her friends and who were going to be her enemies just by whether the cat liked them or didn't like them. And every time she didn't follow the cat's lead, she was sorry later on. She'd have things stolen from her by people who she thought were her friends and they really weren't. So what we're then talking about is some people who are suspicious, fearful, or hateful, or such like that, and their emotions run away with them. Their suspicions become confirmed. It becomes very much like rumor. Rumors aren't facts, but people's suspicion fill in the facts because in the desire world they're all tuning into what they want to know, what they, such like that. That's a form also of a negative emotional clairvoyance. Now the thing about this is, even more than the etheric vision, the desire world clairvoyance, positive or negative, is not limited by space. It is possible to extend your desire body through what would be called many, many miles of physical space to somewhere else and tune in on what's happening there. You can send out your forehead like the trunk of an elephant. You can extend it out to it seems like it's nothing but a thread. And this is one form of what is meant by astral projection. It is not living in the body. It is just the projection and the extension of the desire body through inner space to where you want to be and perceiving what you want to perceive. You don't have to even leave the body to do it. So, okay. So we have the same sorts of categories again here. We have people who are sensitive, but their sensitivity is carried so far that it becomes a clairvoyance. And in some cases, it's involutionary or at least uncontrolled. And in some cases, it's much rarer to find a controlled desire world seer than to find a controlled etheric world seer. But it does happen, and usually those folks don't talk about it. Some of the few people who are talking about it, like one very popular thing that talks about etheric vision, controlled etheric vision, is all of those Don Juan books. When they're talking about seeing the egg and all of that, they're talking about seeing the etheric aura. They're not anywhere near the desirable. They hint at that. They really haven't gotten to that yet. Okay, so there's one more level of perception that we can talk about, and that is tonal potential vision. This means that one can use we have only partially developed our mental nature. Our mind is not even near to approximation to the whole of the desire aura, to say nothing of the etheric physical bodies. The mind is just barely past state of being born. But it is possible, because it is so rare and it is so sensitive, it is possible to evolve the ability to perceive with the mind, which means you would be seeing thoughts in the same way that we see physical objects with physical eyes. There are cases of it recorded in history, but most famously Mozart. Mozart would perceive a thought that was a symphony in a fraction of a second. The whole thing, from beginning to end, when it wasn't from beginning to end, because thoughts as archetypes are complete wholes. So we perceive a complete thought, a total thought, and then he had to figure out how to string it out to make a symphony out of it. Sometimes he did it with blue balls and shaking of dice and things like that to find a theme to break into that whole big thought. And so if a person develops the mind, he doesn't use the mind only to ask questions, but reaches out of the mind to think and has compositions in a creative way about the nature of reality, one can produce thoughts that are coincident with the objects that are being perceived. And when that's the case, one can go through millions of years of past history, because thoughts have a much longer period of living than emotions, and certainly much longer than the etheric and physical. The physical body dies, like 100 years is a very long life, but 10 million years is not a long time for a thought to be in existence, especially if it's a very true thought and a very strong thought. To my knowledge, there is no such thing as an involutionary tunnel vision. The way this goes is you look at an object with your mind, and it sings itself to you. It doesn't sing to you in these kinds of words, but the meaning of it comes out like sound. So that if you looked at a pine tree, and you looked at the thought that went behind the creation of that pine tree, you would hear it as a piece of music. It wouldn't only be a piece of music, it would carry the meaning to it, just like language carries a meaning to it. The only thing is you don't have to speak the language, because it's not a matter of language. You know, because the meaning is right part of music. Just in the same way as like in musical impressionism, for example, the meaning of the music and the character of the music are exactly the same thing. Okay. Now, we've talked about sensitivity and clairvoyance. Now it's time to talk about something that's altogether different. Something much more important. Too inclusive. Insight. Insight comes from the transcendent realms. That is, within the phenomenal realms, in the physical realms, we have a spiritual being. But we who know and we who experience are part of the spirit. And as we awaken in the spirit, we awaken a knowing. That is, there are things that we know about, and there is the truth that we know from them. So, for example, seeing a glass is a perception, but knowing that it's a glass and that it can contain things without them running away is an insight. We figure it out, we know that that's that. Many things we take for granted. When we are having intuitions, we are insightful. And with that insight, we come to know the meaning of things that we have experienced, and that we have experienced more or less through degrees of sensitivity to states of reality. Now, there are two very common kinds of insight, and one is from the realm of the human spirit. And that is Neptunian insight. You can tell the difference between the two right away. We'll talk about the Neptunian first. The Neptunian insight or intuition is a momentary baptism by the Holy Spirit. That is, in the moment, we are in the spirit of truth, as it is called in the Bible. The characteristics of it are, because the human spirit is associated with the ideational mind, or the abstract mind, one of the characteristics of it is common to every intuition. One, you know something is true. A second characteristic is you know why it's true. That is, you're making a deduction relative to some other understanding that you have. You're coming to it, you understand the idea of what you're perceiving intuitively as true. And that gives you the ability to make a deduction. And we all know from Neptunian experiences in astrology that they're weird, that the connections, everything is connected to everything else, and everything is a gigantic chaos. The connections that you can make can be very, very strange connections, like between bumblebees and orangeness. The normal nature of science wouldn't understand those connections. But if you have a Neptunian connection, you're tuning in and you're kind of weird, and you know that it is true, and you know why. You can explain something about it. And if you can bring someone else, because we all live in the same spirit of truth, and if you can explain your experience to someone else, your intuitive experience, that is what that human spirit type of clairvoyance insight is like. Now, the last factor that goes into the Neptunian intuition is you always have a minor self-enlightenment at the same time. At the moment you know something is true, you know why it's true, and you know that it is you that is knowing. They're all three all at the same time. In fact, if you carry it further, you can know that it is you that is knowing, and you can know that it is divine, that it is God through you, or that you are God, and that is what makes the knowing possible. Now, the second kind of insight, intuitive insight, is from the life spirit. It is called Iranian intuition. Now, this is going to strike you as rather funny, but when you think about it, it isn't. You don't know anything when you know something is true with Iranian insight. You don't make the connections. It's much simpler. You just know that something is true. But there is much more of a loving faith with this type of intuitive insight, and you act on it immediately. And you also have much more of a quality of loving reverence, but you just know it's true immediately, and you just act on it, and there's always a feeling of love that comes balance with the intuitive insight. So even though it's coming from a deeper spiritual realm, it's much simpler. But I would even go so far as to say it is because it comes from a deeper spiritual realm that it is simpler. Because the deeper you go into the spirit, the more simple things become, until just the being of the divine is adequate in itself, and one doesn't need anything more than that when experiencing from that level. And so the deeper forms of intuition have a much greater quality of simplicity, but they have a quality of immediacy about them that is very very much present. Okay. The point about all of this is it's always better to develop insight at the same pace or ahead of sensitivity. Because with sensitivity, if it's developed to the level of clairvoyance, you can get yourself into all kinds of troubles. You can get into things that you don't understand that are confusing, and you can take things for granted that you think you know something but you really don't, and you can really go very, very far astray in the spiritual world. You know, it's awfully big in there, but there's just realm upon realm upon realm, and there are complications, and everything seems to be very alluring. And it's always wisest to keep the balance, to be a little ahead with intuition over just mere sensitivity. When the two are put together such that insight goes hand in hand with clairvoyance, then you have what is called spiritual sight. That is, you have developed sensitivity so that you see things, that you perceive things in various of the phenomenal worlds. But you have intuitive insight so that you know the meaning of what you're seeing. You're not just being carried along on a phenomenalistic kind of trip, but you're actually knowing what you're seeing. This produces the type of divine balance that we were intended to have before the fall. We were never supposed to lose clairvoyance. We were supposed to gain insight through clairvoyance. We were supposed to have experiences and know the meaning of those experiences at the same time. But we chose instead experience the exclusion of meaning, and that's why sometimes when in our insensitivity we have to do things over again and again and again, because we haven't listened, we haven't really tuned ourselves into the insight. We've separated ourselves from the divine and made gods of ourselves instead of loving the divine that is in us and in everything. And if we did that, then we wouldn't have that isolation. It would be easier to develop insight and spiritual sight and clairvoyance at the same time and produce a spiritual sight. This is very rare. When you find people who have this, they can see things, they know things that are going on, they're sensitive to things that are around in a way that's almost astounding of what they know that's happening, but at the same time they have a deep understanding of what it means, and what it means not only in terms of psychology, but in terms of the action of the moment, and what it means in terms of a cosmic evolution, all of that at the same time. Okay, now there are several problems involved with sensitivity that I think it's worth looking into, and that is that there should be a balance between sensitivity and control sensitivity. For I, for one, have never found much use to like sensitivity groups, because many people have plenty enough sensitivity to be clairvoyant if they only pay attention to it, but not enough people have control. And if you have ever been in a sensitivity group, for example, you find out that just the opposite happens. People get out of control, and they think it's great to be yelling and screaming at each other and using their insight and pick on each other's faults and things like that, and to make a big deal out of it. There should be a balance. If you have too much control, you have, again, like the worldly wise person doesn't even want to know about that stuff. Let me know, let me deal with what I can handle. Too much control, there's a tendency to just over-control and close things off. Too much sensitivity, a person can be sensitive to things that they don't understand and that they can't control, and they become at the mercy of the world. And it can be very, very terrible when things are coming in on you, and you don't know what they mean or when they were from or who they're about, or if you know those things, you don't know what to do about it. And so it's always, each one can judge for themselves what is necessary. Obviously, if sensitivity is becoming overpowering, you can't handle what's going on, it's probably a good sign then that you better work on some self-control and take exercises that give you plenty of opportunities to control your emotions, to control your thoughts and such like that. However, if your life is dull and boring and doesn't seem to be going any place, and you always have the answer to everything, and nothing is new to you, nothing is amazing to you or puts you in awe, then perhaps you better work on sensitizing yourselves up. Probably it's patchy. We have some of one and some of the other. Some places we need more control, and some places we don't. In general, through the path of control, sensitivity can be unfolded. Sometimes the path of sensitivity control has to be unfolded. I've known a number of people that have unfolded clairvoyance and had it be too much for them. They just had to, like it or not, they just had to brutally take control of their lives in ways. But on the other hand, the path of control, like if one works with something like music and gets to rarer and rarer forms of music, the emotions get extended to different realms. You're open to more different types of feelings, and the more under your control, you can have more of an equalize and equilibrium, and it turns out that through control you can develop sensitivity. Now, one other thing that I want to talk about, we're just about done, and that will go very quick, and that is the problem of purification. And purification from a spiritual point of view is not purification to some external standard. It's a purification to reality. Like there is something that takes place in physics where they try to measure an electron, thinking it's a particle. They can't measure it because in the process of measuring it, they change it. And there is such a thing that you can influence what you're perceiving by the act of perception. And that can take place with clairvoyance. But you can even, in clairvoyance, even skew or influence the perception by your own nature. That is to say, you're always looking through your own aura. What you are is what you have to look through. If you're very selfish, if you're very biased, if you have feelings that are lurid and tainted, you will see that. And that will make it very, very difficult to perceive the reality. Because everything comes through from within. We mentioned before in previous talks that first case is where a person becomes etherically sensitive. Sometimes the etheric sensitivity is enhanced by hypnotism or by sexual interactions, over which give etheric ties between two people. And he'll start picking up other people's thoughts. And it takes a long time of familiarization, and it takes a long time of purification so that you can recognize which are your thoughts and which are the thoughts of another person. And so, because everything that comes within, when you first start doing it, you think you're thinking these thoughts. And then it begins to dawn on you after a while that, gee whiz, I don't think like this normally. And then you begin to purify your own consciousness. You discriminate. Discrimination and purification are the same thing. You throw out what is untrue or what is not the reality or what is the truth to the truest quality of the reality, and you discriminate. And then you discriminate, and as you become more discriminating, you notice that some of those thoughts are not your own, but they are someone else's. And then you have to like to discriminate whether you reached out and picked up that person, or whether it was just ubiquity, or whether somebody was projecting themselves on you. And people have used various suggestive mechanisms. They say, well, if your ear itches, that means somebody's talking about you. You've heard of those things like that. Those are suggestive mechanisms that in the case where a person has not developed the purification, that is the discrimination inside of themselves, so that they can tell what's going on. Okay, so then purification, so that by purification to the reality. If there's a memory, that you remember that memory as it was, without taking it with some kind of sentiment of how you wished it had been. Or if there is a feeling of energy, that you feel it as pure energy and not as personalized energy. That one's fairly easy to tell, because when you feel martial desires, the desires to action, for example, the desire body has its expression in muscles. And since the desire body, for example, is a reflection of the human spirit, the claim is that the sound of the music of the spheres that comes from the human spirit, if you make a muscle and listen